no place like home. With your family around you, you're never alone. When you know that you're loved, you don't need to roam, 'cause there's no place like home.
Oh, all right. Hey, good everything. Good everything. I just,
Good
you know,
everything.
episode 227, I just felt like it was
Yeah.
appropriate that there's no place like home. We got, the of course the Wiz reference, but just wanted to
There's no
coach.
place like home.
Yes.
Stephanie Mills said, when I think of home, I guess we have a home.
What we do, we
Or
made one, right? When your family's around is what she say?
never alone.
That's right.
When your family's around, not your open enemies.
Right. But we're centering us tonight.
Well,
Today.
if
Oh,
we
let me just say good everything wherever you are in the world, Nubians. Hello to you.
could
Later,
everything,
YouTube, we're live in Nubia right
yeah,
now. And
if we everybody else will be seeing this in real time. Might even be able to jump in the chat because we'll be over in Northern Virginia, Dr. Amin and Brother Urias and Brother David Krause, who you talked to, huh?
yeah. You had them on. We had them on. They making their way down the Urban View River, which I appreciate. BlurCon Saturday this morning, 10 a.m. panel discussion on Afrofuturism, led
Yes,
by Dr. Sunyata Amin, with you, of course, and David Crownson, who did Harriet Tubman, Demon Slayer.
Demon Slayer. That's
Yeah,
right.
as
And
we
we need Harriet Tubman, Demon Slayers. A lot of demons loose in the United States these days.
wow.
Demonic folks.
So
And
before we get started, how are you doing? How are you?
I'm doing okay. This is it's a interesting season of the rhythm in no small part because of you. This new adventure on Sirius has been quite the revelation, and yeah, Lamont is wonderful, and being in there at the crack of dawn with Daryl and his crew is Daryl Green, who works the board there, and Sam,
Joe Madison's engineer.
Joe Madison's engineer, which is keeps telling us Joe Madison stories. We he and Lamont were talking about a fist fight Joe Madison got into that I'd only heard vague, but I guess Lamont was there. So it's like, wow, fist fight, two old heads doing it the old way. It's a beautiful thing. And then, sharing a drink together after hands were thrown. I'm like, yeah, you can't get this anyway. And Daryl was talking about when Mr. Madison, of course, broke the record for live broadcast. And he said, this is that couch right there is where the people from Guinness and them were sitting
The
while
whole I tapped in for like 20 minutes, of that. I was like, man,
I couldn't.
what was
I
it,
couldn't
86 straight hours? I think it was.
Yeah, yeah, and apparently, was it? For, I think it's been broken. It's like 55, so it was like 52 or something. Whatever it was, he
52. I'm sorry.
52. No, 52. I think yeah.
Yeah, 52 consecutive hours. He raised $250,000 for the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture. So yeah, 52
Amazing.
hours.
And I didn't realize, and you knew this, I know, but I didn't realize till Daryl said it the other day that he not 1 60-second gap passed without him speaking.
That's right. So the bathroom, that was.
I can't even. It's not time to run it. You gotta.
I know we're not supposed to, like, it's not about Joe Madison, but the man battled cancer the first time, went to California for treatment, and never missed a show.
Yeah,
you think about taking chemo and going through the first battle with cancer, beat it, and walk through it on the radio.
How about that? And he is in that studio. I mean, we're surrounded by his things. Shout out to Shauna and the family, which you have allowed his things to still be there. The photographs, the loop of photographs of him with folks in the Sudan and on Capitol Hill, and you see his various stages when he was bigger Joe physically. When he was
that's right. Before Dick Gregory got a hold of him, the tiny shorts that he wore when he marched for our voting rights and went to the Sudan to free people from enslavement. We're gonna have a conversation today about what does, how do we free ourselves in spaces like this? But yeah, no, yes, and I didn't allow anything. Let me just say, there's no allowance. It's just
Mm,
it's obedience. Like there was no conversation. There was no
no,
conversation had about whether or not these things could or could. You know what I'm saying? It just is. Some things that just are.
it's trust. You
Yeah.
got to trust it. And we stepped out on faith, and it's working. It's working, and it's a remarkable. In fact, it's funny you say Dick Gregory because that's how we started talking about it. Because he was a picture of Baba Dick in there. I said, "Oh yeah, Dick Gregory," and that's how Daryl started talking about. Because he said during that marathon, Dick Gregory came in part of the time and was sitting there where Lamont sits, and I'm sitting there where Joe Madison sits, and and just knowing that energy. That is, yeah, that was his home, and it's different than all the other studios on that floor,
Yes.
which is weird. I mean, we got our key cards, and thanks Sam for getting that straight. See, we can get in the building, we can get through the door, and then you get to the studio, and they weren't working. And then they started working this week. And I said, Joe Masson probably had a special card to get in this room. So they finally had to redo the keypad and let us in the room.
Nah.
The card works everywhere except this studio.
Listen, the few times that I did my show from DC, I could never do it from that studio. It was off limits. Even if he wasn't there. No one could be in that studio. So that is an extreme honor. I have never been in that studio other than as a guest.
So then when you come, you'll do it, and it's going to be beautiful.
Yes.
We just warming it up for you. So you'll come in here and do the Karen Hunter show from the Black Eagle's Nest. Sir, it's important.
This is your baton now.
No. It's funny because, and we'll talk about this in a minute, the guy who was the head of the Heritage Foundation, Kevin David Roberts, a white supremacist who is deeply rooted in the question of memory and place. And we claim we are, but we're not. That's what our work partially is about, deciding whether or not we really are serious about that. So it's interesting that you play the opening theme for 227 because there's no place like home. You got to decide where your home is going to be. For Kevin Roberts, he's very clear. His home is this funky Southern state. For us, our homes are a lot smaller, like the Black Eagle's Nest, like as your brother and our brother Roy Wood Jr. would say, the various cities where Black people create the roadmap through our music to tell you where we can have a good time. It's not the whole country. It's really not the whole country. And in this whole Joe Biden moment, our home seems to be in our self-defense mechanism because we're very clear about what's at stake. We're not donors. We're not single issue groups. We're not Hollywood stars. We're not politicians in swing districts. We are Black people. And from our home base, we are saying, stop playing within our faces. But anyway.
And so let me ask you, since you mentioned the Heritage Foundation from 2005 to 2022, the president and leader was a Black woman.
Mm-hmm.
Keiko James. Keiko James.
Did you ever talk with her on?
No, I'm trying to get her now, actually, because I need to understand. And there's some feedback going on, Dr. Carr. I'm not sure why.
Oh.
Do you hear it?
No, I don't. Let me, is it better now?
Yeah, let me talk. Yep, a little bit. Let me do it.
Okay, hold on. Let me,
yeah.
I don't know what that is.
Okay.
I just pulled the microphone closer to my mouth and I can do that. Maybe that did it.
So probably means I should talk less.
No, not at all. That's not what it means at all. Quite the contrary. So you haven't talked with her?
I want to.
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever seen her. Certainly read about her and read some of the things that she said and understand this is her home. And so
as we're going to have a conversation today, it's gone. We're going to have a conversation today about Denmark Vesey. And July 14th, 1822, there was supposed to kick off a revolt that would free a whole lot of people, maybe in slavery. It was an extensive plan. It was well thought out. It was the blueprint from the Haitian Revolution was being, laid out
for sure. No question.
In Charleston, and it got thwarted because of somebody, a skin folk who ran and told.
How
So
about it?
sometimes it be your own people. Sometimes it be the people, the very people that look like you, who are the people standing in the way of liberation. So I don't know if that's the case with Miss K Coles James. She looks like a nice lady.
Yeah.
I'm gonna drop a link from their website. She's
Oh,
now
no question.
uh trustee, she's
Oh
the
yeah,
honorable,
they
you
take
know.
care of their people now.
Yeah.
They take care of their people.
Speak a little more about that, because a lot of people getting into this conversation and we're talking about race. But race is complicated in the wake of a Tim Scott, or in this case, the head of the Heritage Foundation until 2022. So she had to be part of this project 2025. Like I just need to talk to
Well,
find
the
out.
Heritage Foundation they generate documents like this every cycle. This isn't
Right.
the first one they've generated.
Exactly.
It's the most ambitious, and I understand why, because they are playing for all the marbles while we're watching the ESPYs, but they are clear about what this particular election cycle is about. So yeah, they're playing for all the marbles now. Yeah. So
So I'm dropping the
um,
link. So
good. Let me pull up the app.
yeah, I just pulled up the app and dropped the link.
Okay.
All
Put
right.
my Mark Vesey over here. Oh, here we go. Yeah, beautiful.
Okay.
It's
And
here.
your sweatshirt makes me smile.
I love it. This is like my latest favorite thing.
I
In fact,
closed it says I closed my book to
yeah,
be here.
I call them,
Which
which is 99% of the time true. Wherever I am, I close my book to be
okay.
here.
So
So,
what book did you close tonight? Today?
well, most of the things I need to have a thoroughgoing conversation about Denmark Vesey are now in storage. But I was able to put my hands on one of the handful I wish I could have found quickly. I'm afraid it's in storage. The great African writer in the United States, John Oliver Killens, did a kind of documentary slash novelistic rendering of the Vesey effort called The Trial Record of Denmark Vesey. But this is a decent, actually a good compendium of materials on the insurrection called Denmark Vesey. Let me see if y'all can see it. Let me see if I can see it. Denmark Vesey, the slave conspiracy of 1822. Robert Starobin, in the Great Lives Observed series, um, put this together. And this is from 1960, 1970, rather, which is interesting because he dedicates this compendium to Bobby Seale and in memory of Fred Hampton. Of course, Hampton and Mark Clark had been killed by the Chicago police the year prior. And it's funny because he leaves the E off of Bobby Seale's name, which is interesting. This is all happening in real time. And what you see in this little compendium, uh, after an introduction and a chronology, which we'll talk about in a moment, the life of Denmark Vesey, the African who sought to gather us to strike a blow to end enslavement in Charleston, South Carolina, and outlying regions of the city in June 1822, after forecasting that they wanted to do, as you said, on July 14th, which will be, of course, Sunday. It's coming Sunday, in concert with Bastille Day, which is the kind of ritual moment still commemorated in France, which quote unquote kicks off the French Revolution, Louis XVI. Part one of this compendium, which is a brief compendium, relatively speaking, less than 200 pages, it's a little over 180 pages with the index, is the trials of the conspirators, the so-called official report of the trials of sundry Negroes charged with an attempt to raise an insurrection in the state of South Carolina. The second section, original confessions of Bacchus Hammett and John Enslow. And this is the heart of the evidence for the Vesey revolt, the Vesey rebellion, what is called often in social structure circles the Vesey conspiracy. It's also a source of perpetual contention because there are scholars who argue that these confessions were coerced. There was the threat, and in many times the carrying out of execution, and that these coerced confessions cannot be completely trusted as being accurate. And that really kicked me, because just about anything I would want and need to have a thoroughgoing investigation of that debate, I just don't have access to it, which is another reason why the next stage of getting this, we're gonna have the library and I can get everything, because I have the entire run. The College of William and Mary has a journal, publishes a journal on early American history, and they had this fight out in the pages of that journal, and I was looking up like, oh, no, those went in the box. So I had I would have looked. Michael Gomez writes about this in a chapter in Exchanging Our Country Marks. I think I still have that around. And then there are several. Is Denmark Vesey's Garden? There's a bunch of stuff on Vesey, but if I had to get my hands on one that's prompted conversation, it would be this one.
So I wanted to ask you, leaving off the E was a mistake.
Accident.
It was
Mhm.
so I tend to, with published works, when I see mistakes, I wonder what else is a mistake.
Well,
Like,
you assume that everything's got mistakes in it,
yeah,
right?
y-
Have
y-
you known a book that didn't have errors that made it to?
I mean, even Harry Potter. I remember I was so happy. I think it was book 3. I saw a typo, and I was like,
There
okay,
you go.
yeah. No. I'm asking a different question, but it might be irrelevant.
No, no. What is it?
That sometimes, mistakes happen because people don't. They're mistakes that happen because you make mistakes because you're human, and then there are mistakes that happen because you don't know the
And then there are
correct.
mistakes, and then there are mistakes that happen that aren't mistakes, that are deliberate.
That's
Like you'll find that in African statuary, they will nick something or change to make the point that perfection can't be reached.
okay.
They'll do it deliberately.
I love all of that. So we were having an off mic conversation, maybe it was last week, and you mentioned that there were categories of people that
Yes.
that received information, and I thought it was interesting as we are now, I think, embarking on a similar time in history where we are going to have to organize and plan and plot and do all of these things. But everybody can't get everything, and everyone shouldn't be in on all of the machinations, because that's how this thing got undone.
Well, and that's why I said I wanted to, and I want to, and I'll continue to spend some time with the Vesey narrative and what's been, because so much of it is conjecture. I mean, there's a whole line of thinking spurred by it, and it's interesting. There is he actually includes this in his collection here. There was an article written. Let me see if I can move quickly. Yeah, in 1964 by Richard Wade called the Vesey Plot, a reconsideration. It was in the Journal of Southern History. Wade's article makes the argument there was no insurrection, that white people made this up because they were terrified of the possibility. Remember, the Vesey insurrection takes place in the wake of the Haitian Revolution. There have been similar arguments made, quite frankly, about Nat Turner in Southampton County. Now, of
Mhm.
course, neither is true, and both are true at the same time, that they are made up. What is not made up is the actual efforts of Denmark Vesey or Nat Turner or those surrounding them. What is uh, made up in some ways in real time at the time of the Vesey Rebellion in 1822 and Turner in 1831, all in the shadow in the wake of the Haitian Revolution, 1791 to 1804, and all after, well, actually during the Haitian Revolution, you have Gabriel Prosser in Virginia in 1800. And these are just some of the more prominent ones. There's Pointe Coupee, Louisiana. There's Stono, South Carolina in the 1830s. But in the wake of these things, what it triggers is white hysteria. Think of it as the 18th and 19th century versions of what we're experiencing now in the United States. The fear that black people are going to do to whiteness what whiteness did to black people. So, in the case of Vesey, of course, in the wake of that rebellion and the murder of Denmark Vesey and the execution, so to speak, Peter, Gullah Jack, and the others were killed, executed, killed. They the South Carolina legislature, of course, then appropriated money for what becomes the Citadel. The idea with threatened by the fear of these perpetual rebellions, because Charleston was majority black, just barely, but the outlying plantations were overwhelmingly black. So similar to the Great Replacement theory, or in an echo of sorts, similar to the culture that the Kevin Roberts of the world want to have in the United States, the fear is all these non-white people who are going to bring their culture, and ultimately, it kind of ties in terms of a sentiment to what these folk were scared of during the Vesey Rebellion and then the Prosser Rebellion and the Turner Rebellion. So what's true and what's not true is unclear. And when you read folks like Sterling Stuckey, for example, or Mike Gomez and others, what they will say is whether it actually happened or not is less important. In other words, there's no need to document the idea that African people wanted to be free.
Got it.
So if you're going to start counting heads on who was in on it, and plus common sense will tell you they're not going to tell you. Barack Obama seems to have lost his way, but if you go back to his grandfather's time, Odhiambo, this is during the period of the Kenyan Land Freedom Army, the so-called Mau Mau. The British didn't know who was in the Mau Mau. And you think these women who are working in your house going to tell you they was in the Mau Mau any more than the sisters who were washing clothes in Montgomery, Alabama was going to tell you they was going to the bus boycott meetings. So you can't have a documentary record. And they're saying, so why are y'all trying to count heads? Just know that they was getting ready to set it off. So that's what I'm saying.
So let's take people back. South Carolina legislation had just passed requiring people who own people, they call them slave owners, to get approval from the state before they could free their enslaved, making manumission more difficult. So it almost in the wake of the Haitian Revolution, not only did we have like high, fugitive slave laws it got tighter, it got real tight here, and some say that was the spark. But I want to just sit with Demark Vesey, who might have been born in 1767. They don't know really where, when, or but
No,
they
where?
know,
Yeah, right. Or where?
yeah.
Was on the continent, was in the Caribbean, wasn't in the United States. What becomes the United States? It's either Africa or the Caribbean, but they're not sure which.
But he gets here and he wins his freedom. He's a carpenter.
Well, I mean, let's like
Wins
say around 1767, as a teenager, he is wherever he is from, he's transported and sold along with nearly 400 other Africans from St. Thomas, the Virgin Islands, to Cap Francois, then called San Domingo. Of course, that would be Haiti, by Captain Joseph Vesey, a Bermuda enslaver. So, in other words, Vesey arrives as a teenager on the island that will become Haiti 10 years before the Haitian Revolution uh, blooms in full bloom, 1791. And then he is reacquired by Captain Vesey as a personal servant after being declared, quote unquote, unsound and subject to epileptic fits. That happens shortly after they get to Saint Dominique. So he gets to Charleston, as you say, he gets to Charleston again. He's still a teenager. He gets there in 1783, and the revolution in Haiti starts in 1791, 8 years later. And as you say, he wins his freedom in 1800. This is the year of the Prosser Rebellion. Vesey plays the lottery, the version of the lottery, wins a prize of $1,500 in the East Bay Lottery, with which he purchases his freedom for $600 and opens a carpentry shop, because
Can
these
you
are
pause for a second? Because
Mhm.
there had to be an epidemic of enslaved people who came down with epilepsy, because that similar story, Jeremiah Hamilton, who was the
Yes.
first Black millionaire allegedly on Wall Street, they called him the Prince of Darkness, was also in Haiti and couldn't, it was, couldn't handle the quote unquote, the labor, and had epilepsy and fits and things, and they had to come back and get him because his master had sold him there, and they were like, come get this person because he's not working, and he's sick, but he ended up not being sick at all, but being brilliant. I
Well,
imagine a lot of our ancestors feigned.
and to put a footnote there in terms of critical race theory, there is a field in critical race theory called race crits. race crit theory, and that deals with well, not race crit, actually. I think the phrase is race crip. Where do I have? Let me see. I don't see Carr Bridges' piece here. It's probably over there. I know I have all my critical race theory stuff because I taught that class in the spring. But the whole idea is what they would call so-called disability studies. So Harriet Tubman, for example, who was said to have had fits as a result of the injuries she sustained during enslavement, the idea that somebody had epileptic fits, the idea that the race, in critical race theory, that category that deals with the question of race and disability explores how people who are differently abled are raced. And so they would include, for example, young people or anyone else who is subjected to testing in school and say they got ADHD or they're on the spectrum, and then you treat them differently, or you say, well, they can't do this work. I suspect that I think we all do, during captivity, that label was not in the case of Araminta. I mean, not in the case of Harriet Ross Tubman, but in the case of Hamilton, in the case of Vesey, how much would you might you speculate that those who simply were not agreeable to their captivity might be said to be suffering some type of mental disability or brain damage? In other words, you can't, you simply are not fit for work. Well, no, maybe I'm not going to be captive the way you want me to be captive, and we'll never know. We'll
That's
never know.
that's that's one of those kind of what is it, civil disobedience?
Exactly. Yeah, because I think, and a lot of us, not to make too close a parallel, but I think many of us are familiar with being characterized like that on a job evaluation, when in fact what we're saying is, no, you're not going to work me to death. You're in the break room. Why you sleep again? Oh, because you on the clock. Yeah, I made all them hamburgers and I'm gonna sit back. Okay, let me write up. This person has difficulty. I mean, this is the negotiation. Robin Kelly wrote about that years ago in his book Race Rebels. Not in that same way, but the whole idea, and it resonated with me as an alum of Wendy's and Arby's and Crystal's, having worked those shifts, and understand that it's the people who don't let you work them to death who probably have a good sense. And sometimes they show up on the evaluations as not motivated, or and maybe we make excuses. Oh, I was at the doctor, I took some medicine, I'm groggy. No, I'm not working to death. So you never know the circumstances. But Vesey, yeah, epilepsy. That's they thought he had it, but he learned carpentry. He was a carpenter by trade. Um, One of those skills that perhaps the governor of Florida thinks that Black people acquired during enslavement that actually made it a benefit. But we don't know how much of that he learned from Africans who brought those skills with them from the continent, Mr. White Man. Well, I'm not going to get into the governor, pufferfish of Florida. But the chronology continues. Vesey, um, there was an attempted insurrection that was broken up in 1816 in Camden, South Carolina. They were trying to pull that one off on the 4th of July. And we'll talk about Dr. Roberts at the Heritage Foundation. And an article he wrote that's actually on the Heritage Foundation website, suggesting to us, imagine the temerity, which he wouldn't take as temerity, but an act of benevolence, suggesting to us how we should celebrate Juneteenth. Something I actually agree with him completely on in terms of how we should frame Juneteenth. Uh, but the only thing I agree with him on is the dates. But July 4th, of course, is the outside of those dates. And what Kevin Roberts says in that op-ed, or not op-ed, in that essay on the Heritage Foundation site, is that the 2-week corridor between Juneteenth and July 4th should be a period that we set aside for contemplation. What he wants to contemplate, what I want to contemplate, are 180 degrees opposed. But we do agree that those dates should be considered as something that we should use to contemplate. But yeah, there was a rebellion that was uh, broken up, uncovered in Camden, South Carolina, July 4th, 1816. During that same year and up and through 1817, Black Methodists in Charleston leave the white Methodist organization and affiliate with a new denomination, which has been founded in Philadelphia. And of course, we're talking about Sarah Allen, her husband Richard, and the African Methodist Episcopal Church. The leader of the Black Methodists in Charleston who kind of helped galvanize this connection. His name, of course, he became the second bishop of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. He has a school named for him in Atlanta, the only school in the Atlanta University Center system that is named for a Black person, because it is a school founded by that same African Methodist Episcopal Church. And of course, we're talking about Bishop Morris Brown, who is South Carolinian. So, Prof, when you talk about the legislation that was passed, it was to keep people like Morris Brown out of their native South Carolina, because they were not captive. They had a status that would be marked as free. That's when the authorities began to harass the African Methodist Episcopal Church, which they referred to not as the AME Church, colloquially in the streets of Charleston among Blacks. You know what they called it? Just like what we now call the Prince Hall Masons. And I say that as a Prince Hall Mason. We call it Prince Hall Masons because Prince Hall out of Boston is a venerated ancestor in that tradition. But when Prince Hall was alive and they got the charter for that, for the lodge, they did not call it the Prince Hall Lodge. They called it the African Lodge. And in Charleston, South Carolina, they called their church the African Church. And of course, coming all the way forward, we all know, as we've talked about here and has been talked about many times, and maybe there's one or two people who don't know this or may have to be reminded, that that founding church in South Carolina is known as Mother Emanuel. Of course, that is the founding church in the South of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. If you don't count DC as the South, which of course it is, the National Cathedral is here in Washington, DC. But the church in the South that is marked as the founding of the AME Church in the South is Mother Emanuel, and it was called the African Church. Vesey joined the Hempstead branch of the African Church. And of course, we know that Clementa Pinckney, who lost his life along with the other Africans on the assault, the white supremacist Dylann Roof there in Charleston, was in the South Carolina legislature and pushed forward what became ultimately the statue of Denmark Vesey there in South Carolina. I won't go through the whole chronology. Robert Starobin does a very good job of putting what we would call in our Africana States framework the social structure around the governance movement of Denmark Vesey and his comrades. In other words, he's talking about how during the 1820s, there is a debate. There's a so-called Missouri Compromise. Those of you who remember your white United States history in terms of the spread of enslavement, do you bring Missouri in as an enslaved state or a free state? That's being debated. And during 1820, that same year, that's when, as you say, in South Carolina, these white supremacists imposed restrictions on free Black immigration to and from South Carolina. Immigration with an I meaning coming in there, immigration with an E meaning leaving. But they start saying free Blacks can't come. Morris Brown was out of the state. Morris Brown is not buried in South Carolina. Those of you who know Philadelphia well, when you go to South Street right off of 5th and go over to Mother AME Bethel, which is the mother church of AME, the AME Church, Mother Bethel in South Philadelphia, you know that in the basement of Mother Bethel, there is a crypt. And in that crypt are three bodies: Sarah Allen, Richard Allen, her husband, the founders of the AME Church, among them, and Morris Brown, the second bishop of the AME Church, who couldn't go home. There's no place like home. And his eternal home for his bones are not in South Carolina, not in Charleston. They are in Philadelphia, because them white boys said, we can't have these free Negroes down here. The following year, the winter of 1821, and for a year, up to a year after, that's when Vesey starts recruiting his lieutenants. And he's going outside of the city of Charleston into contact support in the plantation district. And this is where the speculation comes on the regiments that we were talking about, Prof, a little while back. And again, I need to reconvene my sources to confirm that. And John Clark used to talk about this a lot. The idea that these groupings would be organized by nations. And Gomez, if memory serves me correctly, writes about that in his Changing Our Country Marks. The idea that there is a distinction being made between Africans who have been captured and transported to what Elijah Muhammad would call the hells of North America, directly from the continent, with perhaps a brief stopover in the Caribbean. As we know, around 5.5% of all Africans who end up in what we call now North America, or the United States in particular, what we call the United States now, came directly from Africa. Most of our people if you are an African from the United States, you probably got relatives in the Caribbean. But, this is again for the nativists among us. But what we see at that moment of recruiting is that there are distinctions being made among the Africans on whether or not you came from Africa or whether you were born here, and what that may or may not mean about how you view captivity and how you view resistance. Everybody wants to be free, but do you remember a time when you were free? For the Africans who are born into captivity, that's not going to be the case. Now, they will know Continental Africans, including their parents and the community of elders around them and older ones who do remember, and they will absorb that, but it's still a different kind of thing. I want to bring back the white nationalist head of the Heritage Foundation for a minute, Dr. Kevin David Roberts. And I'm bringing this up very deliberately because this is not a man you can dismiss as a know-nothing racist. Oh no, he's a full-bred academic. And you all may have heard this. I brought it up with Lamont the other day on the air when we were doing the morning show series. But he wrote a dissertation in 2021. Kevin David, no, I'm sorry, he wrote the dissertation in 2003. 2003 at the University of Texas, Austin. His dissertation supervisor was James Sidbury, very well-known historian. On his committee, I won't name all of the folk, I'll name one other person, a very well-respected scholar. I've interviewed him. I actually interviewed him for a session at the Black Table on the Black Star Network. I was very much looking forward to having this conversation. We had a great conversation with Dr. Toyin Falola, one of the most prolific scholars of African history of the 20th and 21st centuries. Toyin Falola is an amazing scholar. And Toyin Falola was on Dr. Kevin David Roberts' dissertation committee. And so when people say, oh, he's a racist, yeah, this is what he studied, friends. This is the name of his dissertation: Slaves and Slavery in Louisiana, the Evolution of Atlantic World Identities, 1791 to 1831. What do we know about those two dates? 1791, the beginning of the Haitian Revolution. 1831, Nat Turner's Rebellion. So let me read to you just from a bit of a page, just the beginning of his dissertation. This is what he writes at the beginning, summary. It says, using two Atlantic world events. This is the head of the Heritage Foundation, the captain of Project 2025, the man who went on television I guess yesterday, is making the rounds on social media now and saying that Donald Trump knows all about the Project 2025, but in this political season, it's advantageous for him to say he doesn't know. We understand, and we don't take any offense with that. A man who looked into the camera and said, he's lying, but we understand. Why? Because they're so close now to running this thing into the ground that they can smell it, friends. But this is Dr. Dr. Roberts. Let's see what he writes. He says that David's his middle name. Using two Atlantic world events, the Haitian Revolution and Nat Turner's Rebellion, as temporal bookends. So he's made his narrative. He's imposed a narrative by these two dates. And what's between 1791 and 1831? 1822, the Vesey Rebellion. We'll tie this together in a second. As temporal bookends, this study examines the ways in which enslaved peoples of African descent were not only affected by, but influenced the major societal and economic changes in Louisiana's evolution into a slave society. I'm going to stop there because I've been reading it. The dissertation is just a little over 200 pages. And I've been taking my time going through it because this is not a man and this is not a movement you can easily dismiss. While we are exchanging quips about whether or not Bronny James is going to make the Lakers, while we are debating the functional utility of the Breakfast Club in the Shade Room, while we are waging war over Drake versus Kendrick, Kevin Roberts, Dr. Roberts at the Heritage Foundation is shepherding and quarterbacking a white supremacist fantasy being translated into policy making. While we are debating whether or not an 81-year-old who has had a lifelong challenge of stuttering, who mentioned in passing at the NATO post-NATO summit press conference on Thursday night, this is ageist. He said that in passing. While we are debating whether or not he momentarily substituted Vice President Harris's name for Donald Trump. Shout out to Peter Alexander, who was no doubt being urged on by his producers to shout the question that ended the press conference in which Joe Biden, you said Trump instead of Harris. You have anything to say about that? Joe Biden, his smile is much more effective when he delivers it before walking off, so that Seth Meyers and others can't clown him for walking off. He stood there, gave that smile that he should have given a lot more 2 weeks ago, and said, "Listen to him," and walked off. Yeah, listen to who? The serial man with brain damage. You see, the 78-year-old who's 3 years younger than Joe Biden, but makes so many gaffes that the New York Times and the Financial Times and the Washington Post and CNN and MSNBC all seem to get past that to talk about. While we're talking about age and capacity, Dr. Roberts and his crew are lining up to take over the country, put 20 million people in internment camps, make sure that women have no control over their bodies, get back them student loans that you thought were forgiven, wipe out your Medicaid. And we could go on and on and on, but we won't at this moment. But I'm saying all that to say that you cannot dismiss Dr. Roberts as a crank, because he has studied you. He knows more about Nat Turner and the Haitian Revolution, and what I'm about to say should make everyone here incensed. He knows more about it than you do. Now, there are going to be a handful of people for whom that is not true, but trust me, it is a handful. It is a handful. So as I was talking about this in the context of Denmark Vesey, Vesey is traveling in the outlying areas of Charleston recruiting, and on those plantations, you have infusions of Africans like him who are brought here after birth. And then you have Africans who are born here. And so whether it's apocryphal or not, again, the record is thin enough to allow for speculation and debate among scholars, among academics, because we can all be scholars. In fact, that is something firmly, we've jailbroken the university system. Among professional academics, people who do that for a living, while there's debate as to whether or not there's veracity to this, the idea is that they were going to organize themselves and begin to organize themselves based on saltwater Negroes, what they call saltwater Negroes. These Negroes came over the ocean. They came out the saltwater. The Bambara, the Igbo, the Ibibio, the Yoruba, the Hausa, the Kikongo, they come over. And those Africans who were born here, and freshwater Negroes, you see, Negroes from Tidewater and the Low Country in South Carolina, Negroes from the Gulf of Mexico states, whether it be Mobile, Alabama, or New Orleans, those Africans who found their way into Philadelphia and Boston, those Africans who were in the port cities, Savannah, Georgia, or Charleston, which by the time of the Civil War, of course, the Confederacy says we can run our businesses out of Charleston, South Carolina. We don't need New York City. But the Africans born here, sometimes there's suspicion about how they will approach freedom struggle, because they don't remember being free. They remember being unfree, although they have the human yin and yearning to be free. So how much of that is apocryphal remains kind of a mystery, and may be permanently a mystery. But as Sterling Stuckey writes in his book Slave Culture, which becomes the foundation for a lot of this question of how Africans make culture among themselves, we figure out ways to blend ourselves together into what becomes what we might call Black culture, turning back to the white supremacist Dr. Kevin Roberts in his dissertation. Roberts explores this intimately in Louisiana, dividing Louisiana between the North and the South, the cotton plantations and economies of the North, and then as far the South you go, by the time you get to the Gulf of Mexico, you're talking about sugar. And what he explores is, Dr. Kevin David Roberts, is this question of creolization, a distinction between Africans from the continent and those enslaved here. Creolization is something that fascinates a lot of these academics who write about this question of how African American culture came into existence. Cindy Mintz, of course, Michael Gomez, before that, Sterling Stuckey, Melba Herskovitz, as we were talking about last week when I was showing you the book on New World Africans and Afro-American Studies he's writing before his book, the so-called The Myth of the Negro Past, the debates between folks like that and then people like E. Franklin Frazier, who might be more reticent, who was more reticent to talk about African survivals. Lorenzo Dow Turner, of course, his work with the Gullah Geechee out of South Carolina and language. There's always this debate. When did Africans become African Americans? Well, as the great Ron Walters wrote in his book Pan-Africanism and the African Diaspora, the question is not only when did they become Americans or Jamaicans or when did they become Haitians or Puerto Ricans. The question is, when did they stop being Africans? And that answer is, we never stopped being Africans. So what Roberts is exploring in his dissertation, by distinguishing between these moments of creolization starting in 1791 with the Haitian Revolution, what he says is that prior to that, you're seeing Mande-speaking Upper Guinea Coast Africans being brought into Louisiana. But after the Haitian Revolution, as the Haitian Revolution is going on, these white boys are fleeing Haiti and bringing captive Africans with them. You see this deep infusion of Kikongo people, Bakongo people. What Roberts writes about in his dissertation as this is the head of the Heritage Foundation, friends, what he calls the Congolization of African populations in Louisiana. And not only do they come as Congo, they come as Congo who have been introduced to this Europeanized way of knowing, not European way of knowing, because we know Christianity, like Islam and Judaism, are African exports, John Clark would say, from that region, Northeast Africa, out. But not only do they come as Congo from Haiti, they're coming from a French colony into a Spanish colony. And we know that that Europeanized way of knowing that they would call Christianity is a particular form of Christianity, European Christianity, which you can also call Catholicism. There's no Protestant, it's Catholic, and that's European Christianity. But the Africans who find this thing imposed on them called Catholicism by the social structure, out of their governance formation, as they are what Michael Gomez would call exchanging their country marks, or what Roberts would call in his dissertation, following after people like Gwendolyn Midlow Hall and others, Creolization of these various cultures. What they do is Africanize that Catholicism. So at the heart of the French and Spanish attempt to impose their ways of knowing on these Africans, the Africans impose their ways of knowing on the European social structure, and we get what sometimes I refer to as re-Africanized Christianity, but we don't call it that. You know what we call it? Vodun, Santeria, Macumba, Candomblé, among the Portuguese in Brazil. Is that Christianity? Well, they didn't hid all their stuff under the saints, Santeria. Coming out of Haiti is Vodun. But it's not Mende, it's Congo. And what Roberts is saying is there's going to be a difference between the creolization that took place with the Mande and the creolization that took place with the Congo. Mande speaking Upper Guinea Coast folk versus Bantu speaking Congolese. That's what he calls them in his dissertation, who came later. He says, so the move moves from Bambara to Congo. And when you read Michael Gomez's work and so many other people, I'm just giving a few gloss references, breadcrumbs for folk to follow up. You'll see what starts as maybe nation talk among the distinct nations, Bambara not going to mix with these other people, becomes over time a broader Black identity. So when Vesey is in South Carolina organizing, they know who came from Africa, who didn't, who've been here 1 generation, 2 generations, 3 generations, who's not. Ultimately, the cat that rats them out, just not a Negro who was born in Africa. You know, there's no place like home. But what if your home, you don't remember where you came from, you remember where you were born? Shout out to Byron Donaldson, Wesley Hunt. Shout out to Tim Scott. Shout out to these Negroes who think somehow they came into existence. Shout out to them Negroes who were born, in other words, not even on the water, born on the land, and their dreams are the dreams of their masters. And this is where Dr. Roberts diverges from the rest of us. And why I would not read June 19th to July 4th the same way he reads it, although I think it's a significant corridor. He says that ultimately, because of the constant influx of continental Africans near the Gulf of Mexico, initially because of the Haitian Revolution, the Africanization that takes place in South Louisiana is different than North Louisiana. Any of y'all Louisianians know what I'm talking about. You Grambling Negroes very different than them Southern Negroes, even though you are, Grambling University versus Southern University. When you meet up at the Bayou Classic, y'all all Africans, y'all all Louisianians, but at the same time, the regional variations, Roberts decides to emphasize the regional variations, and he says it moves from less African in the North. So y'all know when you fly into Megawali, Evers, and Jackson, and then drive across that Jackson, Mississippi, and drive down across that border in Louisiana to Lula and then Grambling and Monroe and all them places up there, you are dealing with Northern African, cotton kind of African. You go deeper, you in the sugar place. So you in New Orleans, which, as I told you all when we were there for the National Association of Black Social Workers, and the lady at the National Park Service site, one of the sites we stopped at, was talking about how this is a Latin culture here, very different than the culture of the East Coast. That's going to be what Kevin Roberts, the head of the Heritage Foundation, who wrote his dissertation on this, would say they more African in the South. But guess what? Kevin Roberts is a practicing Catholic. Oh, one of them hardcore onward Christian soldiers Catholic, like Sam Alito, like CT, are you with me? Clarence Thomas, or as he is more appropriately known now, Clarence Thomas. A lot of Catholics on the Supreme Court. But that's not the same Catholicism as Vodun, Santeria, Caromblé, Macumba. No. This is the ideologically rigid Euro Catholicism, even rigid among white Catholics. You understand? And a Catholicism that during the days of George H.W. Bush and his son, George W. Bush, they thought they could ride into some kind of coalition and pick off Spanish-speaking communities who were Catholic and conservative into the white nationalist formation called the Republican Party. And while people are watching the silliness, the foolishness, and I'm sorry, Abby Phillip, you get caught up in that. Laura Coates, any rest of y'all on CNN, I'm sorry about that. But this is not a time for games. So while people getting caught up in what they're saying about Biden's diminished capacity and what the polls are saying, and he's going to lose, and the millionaires are now saying they're withholding $90 million until he quits the race. Okay, what about that poll that said after the debate, when some Latinos that were polled, support for Biden went up? But I thought they were Catholic. I thought they supposed to be conservatives. Yeah, they Catholic, but they not onward Christian soldiers, Samuel Alito and Kevin Roberts Catholic. Ironically, Dr. Roberts in his dissertation critiques the social historians, saving a particular note out for what he calls the Marxian historians. So you see the seeds of where he is today in his dissertation. Well, he was there before he wrote his dissertation, but where he says, y'all discount the role of culture in this. The Marxian historians he says, they're no doubt correct when they talk about the economies of sugar, the economies of cotton, the economies of indigo, the economies of the plantation economies that created the material circumstances for forms of creolization, but you don't spend enough time on the cultural implications of bringing Africans from different places. In that respect, his work is very good. You read his work and you won't be able to make an appreciable distinction between his work and, culturally speaking, the work of somebody like Robert Farris Thompson. Or, and here's where we bring it home, or Angie Porter. When Angie Porter writes her essay introducing the legal community and beyond to the concept of Africana legal studies, taking those conceptual categories and applying them to scrutiny of how Africans in the governance formations of Louisiana began to form self-defense and self-determination formations and use culture as a base, she is exploring the same territory that Kevin Roberts is exploring and coming up with different conclusions. Critical race theory would call that legal indeterminacy when it's applied to the courts. I'll come back to that in a minute, maybe with Trump versus the United States. But the point is this. While Roberts is right to criticize these Marxian historians for dismissing or at least minimizing the cultural impact or shifts of bringing different groups in, while he talks about under Spain and France, African Catholics find a form of relative flexibility in Catholicism as they Africanize it to create space, to work out space, to have some self-determining space. All of that's good stuff. Kevin Roberts, the ideologue warrior in Project 2025 and all his public pronouncements, see his mission as wedding everybody in America to a worldview and a genealogy that does not recognize the African Creolization as part of its foundation, rather recognizes this imaginary-ish. George Washington, James Madison, the debate in Trump versus United States between Federalist 70, which is where you see John Boy Roberts, another good one, talk about the Federalist Papers number 70 talk about having an executive branch that is vigorous and energetic. And that's where they hang up their completely made up theory of president as king. Jamel Bowie did a great job in Friday's New York Times talking about this. You made this shit up. And in the dissent, in Sonia Sotomayor, another good Catholic, and Ketanji Onyeka Brown Jackson writing their dissents, they refer to Federalist number 69, the paper before Federalist 70, when they say, John, y'all making this issue up. There's nothing in the Federalist Papers that say that executives cannot be, they are beyond the law and beyond the scope of prosecution. And you done made up this whole thing about core responsibilities. There's nothing in there like that. However, in Federalist 69, there is allusion to the idea that if any evidence is in any of these Federalist Papers, the 69 shows you these so-called founding fathers were against presidential immunity from federal prosecution. But all of that I'm saying is beside the point. To the point I'm about to make now is Kevin Roberts, who well knows the history, is making choices on narrative. While we're looking for ways to defend the ways we think through the world, Kevin Roberts, who knows a lot of this stuff better than most of us, simply says, now that I know all this, I'm setting all that ish aside and saying that George Washington is your father. But it's not historic. I'm not talking about history. I'm talking about ideology. And we're going to roll over you, and it's going to be another American Revolution. And it's going to be bloodless if you let it. See, you got to stop treating these people as if we're speaking the same language. Because if Kevin Roberts came here right now, we could have a conversation about this. And I'd learn some stuff from him, and he'd learn some stuff from me. We'd have an academic exchange. And then he would go right back down to his bunker and plan to get rid of everybody in the civil service who's going to process your paperwork when you're trying to get your Social Security, and replace them with brown shirt ideologues that say, we're going to privatize Social Security and all them student loans. And did you get some money out? We want all that money back. And guess what? If we don't, we're going to send the police to your house, and we're going to put your ass in the internment camp. We did not dismantle it when we sent everybody out of the country, even the people who were born here but who have a parent who wasn't, because we're going to revoke birthright citizenship. You got to read this. It's not about facts. This is ideology. So Vesey is going out to recruit in Charleston and in the outlying areas. And that recruitment will involve knowing the life story of some of these people. One of his chief lieutenants, perhaps his chief lieutenant, the great Gullah Jack, who said, I'm a spiritualist. I can't be killed. I got a charm to make sure I can't be killed. All of these narratives, his testimony is in this record as well. And of course, as I said, this is 1821 to 1822. He begins recruiting his lieutenants. In May 1822, that's when Vesey sets the date of July 14th. So we're coming up on the anniversary of the original date for the rebellion in Charleston, South Carolina. The darkest night of the month is what Robert Sterben says it, but it's also selected because it is attested that it is selected because it was the French Revolution, which is convenient. I mean, after all, Cyril, Lionel, Robert James, and we devoted a couple of in-class sessions to C.L.R. James, particularly his book, The Black Jacobins, when we were talking about the murder of the Haitian prime minister. And of course, we know now in Haiti, the force is down there on the ground, the invading force, and it's back and forth. There's been a lot of stories floated in the Western press about the effectiveness or lack thereof of the appointed prime minister there. But you remember we talked about that. And of course, C.L.R. James names his book The Black Jacobins because in part he is saying the Haitian Revolution takes part of his inspiration from the French Revolution. So the idea that Vesey would set the date as July 14th, which is also Bastille Day in France, is not beyond the scope of imagination. But when it is clear that the potential for the plans to be revealed begins to rise, they move the date up to June. May 1822, May 25th, the end of the month, William Paul attempts to recruit Peter Devani Prelude, who informs Mrs. Prelude, who is her son, and William Pencil, a free black, who urges Peter to tell his master. That is the one who will go down in infamy. Professor Hunter, as you have evoked him, he is known among Denmark Vesey evokers as Peter the Informer. Went and told his master. Let me see if I can flip very quickly to the testimony of Peter the Informer, the rebellion here. Original confessions, original report, trials of Sunday Negroes, that begins on page 20. Let me see. The trial. Here we go. The Informer's confession. On May 30th, 1822, Peter, also called Devani, a personal servant belonging to Colonel J.C. Prioleau, Prioleau, made the following confession before the Corporation of Charleston attendant James Hamilton Jr. and Governor Thomas Bennett after Peter's disclosures. Peter Poyas and Mingo Harth. Mingo, that's one of them names. See, if you read Mike Gomez or Sterling Stuck, you see Mingo, you see those African names. That's going to be a clue that them Negroes weren't born here. You see. Now you can't tell. Because for every continental African with an African name here, you got an African born here who got an African name. Like an African from Florida named Ketanji Onyeka. But Brown Jackson's a dead giveaway, and Jackson, in a twist of irony, is the name of the white man she married, which is fascinating, right? But the point is this. You can't tell as much now. Then, you could tell. At least, it was easier to tell. So, Peter Poyas and Mingo Harth were arrested, but their behavior was so deceptive that they were released. You know, like people saying somebody epileptic because they fell asleep in the break room. No, I fell asleep in the break room because I ain't gonna bust my ass cleaning out that stock room tonight. Their behavior was so deceptive that they were released. Soon, however, 2 other informers appeared. Further exposure and the trials followed. This is the confession of Clarence Thomas. No, I'm sorry. Tim Scott. No, I'm sorry. Damn. I need some glasses. Here we go. Oh, Byron Donalds. Oh, damn it. Wait a minute. Okay. Wesley Hunt. Peter, the Informer. Yes. On Saturday afternoon, this is what he's saying. On Saturday afternoon last, May 25th, my master being out of town, I went to market. After finishing my business, I strolled down the wharf below the fish market, from which I observed a small vessel in the stream with a singular flag. Whilst looking at this object, a black man, Mr. Pauls William is the name of the guy, Mr. Pauls, who, quote unquote, professed to own him, came up to me and, remarking the subject which engaged my attention, said, I've often seen a flag with the number 76 on it, but never with 96 before. After some trifling conversation on this point, he remarked with considerable earnestness to me, do you know that something serious is about to take place? Because he didn't pick up on the clue. See, you got the password. Peter the Informer ain't in it. So when the brother says, I often seen a flag with 76, but not 96. Peter's like, huh? Yeah, man, you ever seen a flag with 96? Huh? So finally the brother says, and this is a mistake. Do you know that something serious is about to take place? To which I, Peter the Informer, replied, no. Well, says he, there is, and many of us are determined to right ourselves. I asked him to explain himself when he remarked, why, we are determined to shake off our bondage. And for this purpose, we stand on a good foundation. Many have joined, and if you will go with me, I will show you the man who has the list of names who will take yours down. Peter the Informer says, I was so much astonished and horror struck at this information. See, it's a scared Negro. I was so much astonished and horror struck. Y'all gonna replace Joe Biden? I'm sorry. Y'all gonna try to be what? In other words, imagine living in a society where you, as an African person, do not have enough confidence in yourself or in people who look like you, who share your condition, to step out and say, we can resist this oppression. Do you like being a slave? Well, some Negroes like being a slave. You understand? This is the conflict that is taking place right now. Some people have fear of losing their comfort. The leader of the Democratic Party in the United States House of Representatives, Hakeem Jeffries. Hakeem, another one of them names, but that's his daddy and mama. Leonard and Rosalind Jeffries' brother and brother-in-law, sister-in-law, that named Hakeem and Hassan Jeffrey. So they wasn't born in some place, they born here. And got them Muslim names, which drives white people crazy, right? Barack Obama, Kamala Harris, names just drives y'all crazy. But guess what? Let me pause. All right. But yeah, Hakeem Jeffries went to the White House the other night, talked to the President of the United States. I'm just conveying all the concerns. Meanwhile, the shadow speaker, Nancy Pelosi, who has other interests, telling the Democratic congresswomen and congressmen in swing districts, y'all do what y'all need to do to survive. And that's why that fraction of the 435 people in the United States House of Representatives, almost half of them Democrats, and people are up in arms because of 8, 9, 10, now 14 that come out. Maybe 40 more will come out. Maybe, we don't, but the point is it's still a minority, because they want to preserve their viability. They want to be reelected, and they got white nationalists in their districts, or perhaps some of them do believe it. But in other words, their politics is being driven by self-preservation and fear that they can't step out and do the thing they really want. Who's holding firm so far? The Congressional Black Caucus, Latino Caucus. Yeah, they holding firm. Why? Because, in this set of circumstances, we understand how this thing works. The millionaires are going to be fine. Trump takes over and they ruin the country. You're going to be on the south of France, ain't you, George Clooney, sipping your Chardonnay with Barack Obama and them saying, damn, that's fucked up. You believe that? Yeah. Can I get another round? That ain't us. I saw Cori Bush today saying that we're getting calls, and 100% of the people saying Biden should be replaced. We're getting calls in St. Louis. She said, so I want y'all to call the office and tell me what y'all want. Who knows whether those are robocalls? Who knows those are ops? Because black opinion seems to be trending to the degree you can trust any of these polls. And Clay Kane tells you can't really trust the polls. But, all the people calling into serious, all the people talking in black spaces saying now the dude shouldn't be replaced. And they're not saying because they love Joe Biden. No. But the point I'm trying to make is that those who put their personal interest over everything else are the easiest to betray the collective interests. Peter the informer says. He says, after you tell him to take your name down, I was so much astonished and horror struck at this information that it was a moment or two before I could collect myself to sufficient to tell him that I would have nothing to do with this business, and that I was satisfied with my condition. Well, shit. There it is. That I was satisfied with my condition. Well, hell, if you're satisfied with captivity, we should stop talking to you, Peter. That I was satisfied with my condition. That I was grateful to my master for his kindness. Oh, that's Byron Donalds. That I was grateful to my man. In fact, you see his ex-wife walk you through the whole thing. The marriage, when he came down to Tallahassee with the fake Jamaican accent. Now we say fake Jamaican accent because people are from Jamaica, but ultimately saying I'm going to distinguish myself from everybody else who is from New York now here at FAM. I saw that Larry Robinson, the president of FAMU, resigned today. Also, David Thomas, the president of Morehouse, these HBCU presidents switching out, right? People blaming the gift at FAMU and maybe the Biden speech at Morehouse. But one thing is for certain, we're in a moment of flux. FAM, Rattlers, strike and strike again. We all with y'all in prayers because you're going to let Larry Robinson go and that funky racist governor of Florida, you think he ain't going to have a big hand in picking who next will be the president of FAMU? We just went through our hell at Tennessee State, but it ain't but one big HBCU with 100 and something different locations. So we stand in solidarity with y'all. It's going to be a difficult time. But Byron Donalds, when he went down to FAMU as a student before transferring to Florida State and finding the woman of his dreams, got married. And his wife, who he met at Florida A&M, has now come out in her reports and talked about how this guy that I see now, he wasn't none of that, no religion kind of conviction like that. And I went, no, this is all ambition. Don't recognize him. And you could tell in the interview, at least her responses that were published, that I don't say there was a reticence, but she still ain't trying to beat him up. She just saying, this is dangerous. And this guy, which is a beautiful thing, because African people got a lot of room in our heart. And part of the room in the heart of African people led this brother, William, to tell this fool, Peter the informer, who was satisfied with his condition, Tim Scott, who was grateful to his master for his kindness, Byron Donalds, and wished no change. Peter says, I left him instantly, lest if this fellow afterwards got into trouble, and I had been seen conversing with him. Wait a minute, hold up. Let me stop, y'all. Because we all know this Negro. Don't you just know this Negro on the job when you come and say, you know what, we all ain't had a raise. And no, hey man, I don't want to talk to you. Why? Because they're gonna see me talking to you and I'm gonna get in trouble. Y'all know this Negro. Peter the informant is well known in black communities. Let's keep going. He says, I was so much astonished and horror struck at this information that it was a moment or two before I could collect myself sufficient to tell him that I would have nothing to do with this business, that I was satisfied with my condition, that I was grateful to my master for his kindness and wished no change. I left him instantly, lest if this fellow afterwards got into trouble and I had been seen conversing with him in so public a place, I might be suspected and thrown into difficulty. I did not, however, remain easy under the burden of such a secret, and consequently determined to consult a free man of color named, and then they don't put the name there. The footnote there says that, that's footnote 1. Oh, that's interesting. The footnote doesn't line up here. But they don't name the guy. He went and consulted a free man of color. See, a free man of color is a term of art, particularly in the Latin-based communities, the Spanish, like Charleston was originally, or French, like Charleston was originally, and then New Orleans, free man of color. Roberts writes about that in his dissertation. Again, because that's a different kind of creolization. Roberts spends a good part of his dissertation talking about those Africans who are born here, who then become part of that polyglot culture in the New Orleans area. You know, you start talking about, and those of you from Louisiana, Southern Louisiana, you can start talking about these various different occasions, you know, the Acadians, the Africans, the free people of color, all these different kinds, the indigenous people, the Indians, which you get, that's where you get the fascinating glosses like the Mardi Gras Indians, or those free people of color, like when Adolph Reed writes about in his book, The South, growing up in New Orleans, how I think it was his auntie who could pass for white, and they would send her in to get the beignets that they wanted because they couldn't go in. They were too dark. They were clearly black. She could be, well, the free people of color. Now you can understand why Vesey and them are suspicious. I want to be free. Hold on, bro. I don't know about you. Some of the let me call it backward, because there are real political differences that a lot of people, legitimate political differences people had with the now Vice President of the United States when she was a senator from California, and before that, the Attorney General. Even as she was doing some very important progressive work, there were other policies that were, you know, just we can't support that as African people, not most of us anyway. But those things, if you notice in the 2 weeks since they have been after Joe Biden to step aside, those things have kind of been pushed back into the conversations among African people in favor of what is clearly going on. Y'all don't want Kamala Harris to be president of the United States. It's not that you don't think Biden can win. Certainly there's some people who think that, and some people who think it very strongly. But there's also more people who are saying, yeah, he could win, but he ain't going to serve 4 years, which is why if you listen carefully to the statements and questions, the statements and questions often include, can he do a full 4 years? You see, that's why you have a vice president. Because that's why you have what's up. You didn't put Big Gretch on the bottom of the ticket. Whitmer, who by many accounts Biden wanted, Biden's people wanted, you picked Kamala Harris. You see? And strategically, that may have helped you win the White House. Because black women was going to bust their ass, and a lot of black men was going to bust their ass, like Cliff Albright, Latosha Brown, women and men, communities. I'm not going to get into that whole question of who did more. We all did a lot. And when they drug Ossoff and Warnock across the finish line in Georgia and won that state for Joe Biden, put it in the win column, Kamala Harris had a lot to do with that. While in the African community, free people of color, there is a suspicion, some of it based on politics and policy, legitimate political differences with the now sitting vice president, and some of it based on deep-seated suspicions that are rooted in who your mama, who your daddy, whether it be the obscene blackface nativism of ADOS and FBA and BA, B1, what you want to call it, or, as Zora Hurston wrote famously, black folks are fools about color and hair. And she bougie. She went to Howard and she had AKA. So all that, but notice that stuff has been muted recently as Kamala Harris has practiced a very effective stump speech and critique of these white supremacists. But that's not enough for white people, because guess what? All you Negroes under suspicion, including you, Vice President Harris, I don't want to be there. Why? Because Gretchen Whitmer said, well, there go my chance to be president. Gavin Newsom said, well, there go my chance to be president, because if Biden wins and turns it over to her after 3 years or 2 years or 1 year or right at the end, she going to be the incumbent. Now I got to beat her. Damn. And when she win in 4 years, she gets to run again. Yeah, she'll have 2.5 terms. So 4 and 4 is 8. And let's say he turns it over halfway through. That's 10. And he said, okay, then you can run. No, I can't run then. Why? The demographics have shifted even more. And there's a guy who's 55 years old, which is 4 years younger than I am now, 10 years from now, because he's 45 now, the governor of Maryland, Wes Moore, who might be the guy who y'all thought Barack Obama was. This is a problem. Anyway, we got to stop that. Now, I ain't going to lay no blame at anybody, one person individually, but we all know when George Clooney kneecapped Joe Biden in the New York Times op-ed page the day the NATO summit ended, part of the reason he did it and dropped it then was because he had called Barack Obama. Yeah, that's been reported now. And Barack Obama said, I ain't going to tell you to do it, I ain't going to tell you not to do it, but I will say if you're going to do it after the NATO summit. Oh, so you in this, Barry? Oh, yeah, you in it. Because your swamp creature out of Louisiana between you and Bill and Hillary Clinton, James Carville, speaking like the crypt keeper. Biden can't win. I done looked out. Biden can't win, Joe Scarborough. I can't. Man, nobody want to hear from you. Your friend, Hillary, she dropped that ball in 2016. And her frenemy, Barack, he the one that called Joe Biden and said, bruh, thanks for 08. Yeah, thanks for 12. But I'm going with Hillary. Oh, what the hell? We got stuck with the bill, white nationalist Trump, and didn't get the gravy we were promised. But even though Obamacare is repurposed from a one-time Republican healthcare plan, Project 2025, Kevin Roberts, who knows good and well what he's talking about when he's talking about black people in Africa, but knows good and well that he's an ideologue who's going to put all that aside in favor of his imaginary narrative, going to end that healthcare. Read Project 2025, and those who are terrified are going to sit back and say, look, I'm just trying to preserve my viability. And those who are going to fight, they're going to move away from them. Again, to finish with the testimony, on conferring with this friend, the free man of color, on conferring with this friend, he urged me with great earnestness to communicate what had passed between Mr. Paul's man and myself to my master. So the free man of color tells the American-born Negro to tell it to the white dude. Hey, man, you need to tell him, because you're going to get in trouble. You can stand there talking to that Negro in the break room. Y'all all going to get fired. You better tell him what he was planning. And he says, on conferring with this friend, he urged me with great earnestness to communicate what had passed between Mr. Paul's man and myself to my master, and not lose a moment in so doing. I took his advice, and not waiting, even for the return of my master to town. He couldn't even wait on Lindsey Graham. I'm sorry. He couldn't even wait on Mike Johnson. He couldn't even wait on Mitch McConnell. He couldn't even wait on his master to get back to town. Peter the Informer, he said, I mentioned it to my mistress. Faithless mistress. This is South Carolina. Nimrata, I thought you said Donald Trump was a threat. Then you told your delegates to vote for him. I mentioned it to my mistress and young master. On the arrival of my master, he examined me as to what had passed, and I stated to him what I have mentioned to yourselves. The testimony, the informer's confession. Peter, the informer, goes down in infamy. So the Vesey rebellion gets broken up. Put a bow on this and we'll turn to a close tonight, because we're going to BlurredCon in the morning. Hopefully we'll see some of y'all there. Part 2. Oh, no. Let's go to the chronology again. I'll finish that up. So on May 30th, Peter confides in Colonel J.C. Prelude, that's his master, and is interrogated by Charleston authorities. So they take him to the police. Now he diamond out everybody, right? Everything he knows, which ain't much. May 30th and 31st, J&D, Paul's enslaved. these are the captives who are owned, belong to, are captured by J and D Paul. They are arrested and interrogated. William Paul implicates Peter Poyas and Mingo Harth, who are arrested, questioned, but released, as I said. Vesey advances the time of the rebellion to June 16th and begins to destroy all records. Juneteenth. Before there was Juneteenth. 16th, not 19th, but we won't quibble. June 8th, William Paul makes further confessions and official investigations continue. June 14th, George Wilson, a slave used as a spy, a Negro. June 14th, George Wilson. Y'all know this Negro too. A slave used as a spy. So remember yesterday we were talking about people letting other people clocking in for other people when they come in. Who'd you say? Man, I don't know you. What Jedica say? I don't know you. You ain't familiar. I don't care who shot you. They ain't kill you. I don't know you. You ain't familiar. Here come a Negro sniffing around because they was ear hustling her. Yeah, so what's the date? When y'all got, who know you? You ain't familiar. June 14th, George Wilson, a slave used as a spy, learns that the African church, Mother Emanuel, is one center of the conspiracy, and that rebellion will begin at midnight, June 16th. June 15th and 16th, Charleston officials organize and deploy military forces. Vesey and other leaders meet and try in vain to communicate with plantation supporters. They can't get out of the city to communicate with the other people. Now, when they put them on trial and they execute a bunch of these folk, they never find the guns. The academics, some of them say, see, they were just because there were never no guns. No, fool, they hid it from white people. It's overwhelming majority black people in the plantations, and in the city, they're barely the majority there in the city. You think they got the guns in the city? We'll never know. June 17th to 18th, 10 Africans were arrested, including Peter Poyas and Ned Rolla and Batu Bennett. Court assembles. Vesey goes into hiding. June 19th to the 27th, court holds hearings. 15 more blacks arrested. June 22nd, Vesey is captured at his wife's house. I realized that I think Tyler Perry has another minstrel show out now on Amazon Prime. I'm sure at some point I'll watch it or not. I know the opening scene, they take the body out the casket or some. I mean, you know, this is a type of broadsword minstrelsy that I think the officials in Charleston would have approved of. Can't y'all just go watch a Tyler Perry play instead of plotting rebellion? Anyway, I did mean for Tyler to catch a stray. Vesey is captured at his wife's house. What I'm saying is to say is, please, ancestors, please, Creator, never let people who should not try to make films of these things make films of these things. Can you imagine them knocking on the door? Can you imagine them knocking on the door and Idris Elba or Sterling K. Brown, and maybe it's Taraji P. Henson, or, you know, maybe it's Aunjanue Ellis, you know, or whoever. Put your favorites in there to capture a Vesey at his wife's house. See, one of the challenges we have in cultural meaning making when we combine it with movement and memory is that when we hit that resonant chord, oh, you be ready to fight somebody. That's why a lot of white school children's asses got whipped as Roots was coming on television in 1977, and kids was going to school the next day. They're not wrong. By they, I mean the white nationalists. They are not wrong about what will happen if you don't try to make this little spunky settler colony something other than what it has been. See, the problem with 2025, Project 2025, will not be if it succeeds. The problem with Project 2025 is these Negroes think they have, and by that I mean these white people, think they have the muscle to continue to put their foot on our necks. Do you know that every time you've tried that, it ended up in bloodshed? There's going to be another American Revolution, and it's going to be bloodless if the left lets it. You're talking about left and right. We're not talking about left and right. We're talking about the preservation of African people. We don't even think about it in terms of left and right. We use that cosplay the same way these Negroes use the cosplay of Catholicism, so you leave us alone. But you're going to keep on till you piss us off. And then you're going to find out that a third of your army don't look like you, and all them jarheads you got in there and that million rounds of ammunition might not be enough. And your Christian soldier on the Supreme Court and your wholly owned subsidiary Harlem Crow on the Supreme Court and all your other little friends and your downturned smile balls and strikes Chief Justice not going to be able to save you, just like Brother Bowie said in the New York Times today. Most people can't tell you who the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court is, but if and when this country survives, one day they look back, they could tell you that Roger Taney was the Chief Justice. He was the Chief Justice who wrote Dred Scott. And they might to know who John Roberts is, Citizens United, Shelby County versus Alabama, Trump versus United States. They might know who John Roberts is because when the thing dies, as Martin King said in Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos to Community, the autopsy at that moment might read Vietnam. Because, as Clay said, you don't have switching the president for the vice president or somebody else and you win the election. One time that happened, it wasn't because the president resigned because he wanted to, it's because somebody blew John Kennedy's brains out and Lyndon Johnson was put in, and then Lyndon Johnson won election on his own, and then Lyndon Johnson said he would not run for re-election because of Vietnam. And King said, if this country dies, part of the autopsy going to read Vietnam. And if King was here today, he might say, if this dies, part of the autopsy is going to read Citizens United and Trump versus United States. And they're not going to be able to save it. That doesn't mean everybody's going to die. What it does mean is that this fragile polity will not survive. And this is where I kind of, as I begin to wind to a close, I think about tonight. I couldn't get it out of my head because we had a meeting on Thursday afternoon, a meeting with folks who are putting together a course called Music of the African Diaspora at Howard. It's going to be offered, part of it virtually. This was the initial brainchild of Felicia Rashad. And we were all in the meeting and we're on Zoom talking about this course and had this wide-reaching conversation. Kenyatta Gilbert, the dean of the School of Divinity, my friend and brother. Saiz Kamaluddin, master musician from School of Fine Arts. Professor Sneed out of Fine Arts, a historian of Black music and a musician himself, a fine musician in all types of formations. Sam Crew, Dr. Crew, who used to be the dean of School of Social Work, recently retired, having this conversation about the nature of Black music and how we're going to do this. And, Dean Rashad was kind of steering the meeting. And as we were talking about it, we were talking about how music for African people, and I made this point, because I was talking about it in the context of our Africana Studies framework. And I said, when you start talking about speech, when you talk about music, you're really talking about speech. Not be a speech with your mouth, but speech with sound, speech with sight, speech in the Egyptian sense, medu, action, everything that can be communicated. And we talked about Haroldine Trillier, Professor Trillier out of School of Divinity, brilliant brother from West Philadelphia. He's gonna give a lecture in the course about the nature of protocol. He went to Morehouse and he said there were certain songs in the Morehouse Glee Club that our choir director said, y'all not old enough to sing that song, so we're not gonna sing that song. I said, yeah, there's a protocol because we don't just sing for entertainment. See, the social structure wants us to dance and entertain. That's why when you read histories of captivity, you often read the histories of Black dance and Black music and Black joy, because that's the thing you want. What you don't want is the protocol that comes with it. We had a conversation about how, for example, South Korea is so fascinated in Japan, with Black choirs and they're singing these choirs and then K-pop. You say, yeah, all of that. But when it comes down to governance formations in those societies, they're going to go within themselves and use their music, their cultural meaning making. And guess what? They're not going to make it into a Black version. No, because this is a protocol that goes back centuries and we're going to maintain it. Now, when it comes time for our popular culture and for entertainment, we want you to sing a song. We're going to learn your song and sing it too. And that's great, but that's we're missing the point. And I'm coming around to make this point. Because as we were talking about, you all ain't old enough to sing that song. I said, it reminds me. I remember years ago being in conversation and people saying, Michael Jackson was too young to be singing them old man songs. And it's part of the problem. The market dictates how people perform. It's performance. The speech, the music, the cultural meaning making is not linked to governance formation. There's protocols for when you sing this, when you dance this dance. No, it's not. It ain't the twerking that's the problem. It's why you move in that way and in what context that becomes the problem. It's been divorced from anything other than booty shaking. Now, I'm saying all that as a backdrop to this. Michael Jackson, as a child, can it be I've been away too long? Did I cross your mind when I was gone? You 10 years old, man. What are you talking about? Did I cross your mind when I was gone? But near the end of his life, all I want to say is they don't really care about us. And we were talking because somebody's going to give a talk about music in Latin America, Brazil in particular. And I said, when I was in Salvador, Bahia, we went to an Olodum concert. Olodum, like Olodumare from the Orisha, the Yoruba. It's a huge cultural kind of governance formation, what we might call a musical group, but really a movement and an organization in Brazil. And in Salvador, we went to the concert. You got young people, old people, babies, little children, elders. Everybody can enjoy it, like going to a Frankie Beverly concert or Patti LaBelle for that matter, or Aretha Franklin. You can bring everybody, Stevie Wonder, Earth, Wind and Fire. You can bring people to it, right? Fela Kuti. You can bring people, you dance, man. And when Michael Jackson makes that song, all I want to say is they don't really care about us. The social structure excoriates him for some lyrics in there. Because some people you just ain't gonna talk to and talk about like that. I am absolutely certain that some of those elements have found their way into the Biden must go campaign. Because when Joe Biden stood at the NATO, post-NATO press conference last night and said, this war must end, no matter what else he said about supporting and going after Hamas, you say that, you're going to piss some of these people off. And some of these people got a little money. And then they're going to say, and then today in the Wall Street Journal, today in the New York Times, today in Financial Times, $90 million being withheld from donors until Biden quits. Look, y'all going to stop playing with our lives. But when Michael Jackson, so it wasn't just the song, it's the lyrics, but when he went to do the video, he did one video when they went to the prison motif. The other live video he did in Brazil. And in those streets in Brazil, one of the biggest criminals in Brazil guaranteed Michael Jackson's safety and his whole crew. So you can leave your cameras on the street. You can leave, because y'all want to film here. We support that. All I want to say is they don't really care about us. And I was making a point in the conversation we were having that, music with a purpose. You don't have to say like Kenny Gamble and Leon Huff said in Philadelphia International Records, that it's music with a message. Because our speech, our music, our musicality, our efforts of cultural meaning making and movement and memory are linked to the idea of governance. What is it for? So when Denmark Vesey is captured at his wife's house, whoever makes that film should not be making it for entertainment and performance. It should be coming with a message, because when you hit a chord like that, it resonates with us. It resonates with us. And when you betray the governance formation by behavior that sells us out, it's hard for us to forgive you. We had a hard conversation about that too, because I also brought up another example. I said, how do you separate the cultural meaning making from the context? And how do you separate those who are doing the cultural meaning making from the person? Even should we? Because if all of us have had a penny, if we had a penny for every 8th grade ceremony, moving up to the 9th grade, every high school graduation, where you heard somebody sing, I'm that star up in the sky. Can't sing it now. But the sentiment, I don't care. It's Robert Kelly. We had that conversation here in Nubia with Dr. Delaney, talking about that, the difficulty of grappling with that. We can't turn away from it, friends, because we're in a moment now where we have to understand that we are not going to survive unless we take very seriously a confrontation with not what we do, but why we do it. Because other people are clear, like Dr. Kevin Roberts, who's very clear about our history and also very clear about what he's trying to do. And they are two separate things. So they captured Denmark Vesey at his wife's house. June 23rd, Vesey tried, convicted, and sentenced to death. One day, July 2nd, coming up into the month we're in now, Vesey, Poyas, the 3 Bennetts, and Jesse Blackwood are executed. July 5th, Gullah Jack captured after trying to continue the revolt. Gullah Jack was going on. Dr. Clark says, somebody died, you buried a man, you continue to plan. You buried a woman, you continue to plan. July 9th, Gullah Jack, John Horry, Charles Drayton, Monday Gale, and Harry Haig condemned to death. July 10th, Drayton, Haig, and Gale make confessions and are reprieved. July 12th. That's where we sit tonight. It's the anniversary of the execution of Gullah Jack, the spiritualist, the man who had the way of knowing, the man who knew the juju, the man who they were terrified of. When Gullah Jack testified, the people who had given it up were terrified. And when they got on the stand, Gullah Jack was still there. They was like, no, it's okay. He can't hurt you. No, you don't know. You don't know. He can't hurt you. Yeah. Because see, them ways of knowing are very powerful. So the Vesey Rebellion, I'm sorry, let's keep going just for a minute. July 13th to the 25th, arrests and trials continue. July 26th, 22 are hanged. The first court adjourns. August 1st through 8th, second court holds trial. August 9th, William Garner executed. October 7th, 4 whites convicted of inciting slaves to insurrection. See, that's the other thing about it. Whether it be the New York plots of 1712, Stono, you often find, certainly in Louisiana, you often find non-blacks involved in this, indigenous people, even white people. New York, that so-called Great Negro plot, you find white people involved in this. Then the problem with filmmakers is they're gonna make the white person the one that survived to tell the story, and they'll tear shed, and they'll, oh no, you don't get to make this film or make it. Ain't nobody gonna watch it. November to December, legislature meets, reimburses masters and informers. Reimburse. So when this Trump administration comes in, they wipe out the civil service. You don't think Byron Donald's wife, the one that he got pregnant while he was with his wife that he met at Florida A&M, and he asked her for a divorce so he get married to her, and then gave this black woman who he's married to first an invitation to the wedding?
What?
You don't? Yeah. Oh yeah. Read it. You go find it. Probably somebody dropped it in the chat while I've been talking. Byron Donald's wife pulled out all the receipts. Anyway, yeah. I mean, you don't think she gonna get a job in the new Trump administration? Maybe Secretary of Education, because when Donald's in the Florida legislature helped pass the charter school legislation, guess whose wife made all kind of money with her company, which does charter schools, and she on the board of Moms for Liberty. And we talking about he's 81, he stumbled over his words. I saw him trip up a flight of stairs. Yeah, okay. Well, you gonna go down that same flight when Trump get in. Anyway, legislature meets, reimburses masters and informers, passes further anti-Negro laws, the Citadel and all that. So the Vesey Rebellion gives us a chance to give a lens to talk about how we have insurrection, how we resist in a social structure where they don't really care about us. Not like us. You understand? No, they don't care about us. You could be not like somebody and find, which is crazy because there's even a native. Anyway, I'm going to talk about that because we go down the Drake Road with free people of color and all that kind of thing. But again, social structures, governance formations all rely on ways of knowing, on cultural meaning making, and on movement and memory, how you remember things and pass them on through time, that create coherent societies. Dr. Kevin Roberts, head of the Heritage Foundation, quarterback of Project 2025, on TV talking straight cash money-ish now, Second Revolution, be bloodless if y'all let it, blah, blah, blah. In his dissertation, no, I'm sorry, I'll end with this. Talks about Juneteenth. Remember I told y'all about that? Because I'm still reading the dissertation, fascinated with this. Let me see if I can find his Juneteenth piece. Let me see. I pulled up a copy. Y'all can find this on the Heritage Foundation's website. I think this is it. Yeah, this might be it right here. Yeah. Don't let the left ruin Juneteenth's true meaning. Oh, you know about Juneteenth's true meaning, huh? Okay. June 19th, 2024. He put this out on Juneteenth on the Heritage Foundation's website. He says, America on Wednesday will celebrate Juneteenth as a federal holiday for the fourth time, yet the holiday born out of bipartisanship. You smell that? What? That's that gas light. Somebody left the gas on here? Mm-hmm. You left the gas on all over America. It's becoming more divisive each year. The left. See, this is their boogeyman. Now, in his dissertation, he's blaming the Marxian historians for giving a materialist rendering to what happened in Louisiana, which he says is accurate, but diminishes the question of culture. In his political work, he uses these political tropes, but is trying to evade the essential thrust which he has, which is a thrust of culture. Oh, you got to pay attention to this. Angie Porter, reading the same documents he read, came with another conclusion because she's going in from a governance formation, not a social structure formation. And so you can read what happened between these various Africans, like we can read the Vesey Rebellion as Africans wanted to be free. Morris Brown wasn't born in Africa. Understand that very important distinction between a political agenda and facts. It's a different thing. So he says the left has co-opted Juneteenth to push for radical racial policies like reparations and exclude most Americans from its celebration. Exclude most Americans from it. How you going to celebrate Juneteenth? Maybe you and Ms. James going to celebrate. Anyway, as a result, many conservatives now oppose the federal holiday. Oh, that's the reason they oppose it? Because the left, I mean, this is the fantasy world of somebody who friends we have established, if nothing else today, knows better. Oh, he knows better, but he's counting on y'all not to think that he knows better. This is the problem. Do not underestimate these people. Donald Trump is a blathering idiot. The people going to surround him are not. And you saw a Supreme Court make up law out of a whole ass fantasy with no sources. Just like Roger Taney and Dred Scott invented a national citizenship and a state citizenship, divided two, and so you got to be both of them, and Dred Scott don't satisfy. You just made that. Anyway, but in the eyes, he writes, of this Texas historian, he calls himself a Texas historian because he is, it's a mistake to abandon a unifying national holiday to the manipulations of the left. A unifying, all right, I'm going to spend a second on this. Y'all understand. Because I am not one of the people who looks at Juneteenth as a unifying national holiday at all. I look at Juneteenth as a declaration of who we are to other people and who we are to each other. And if everybody wants to share in it, there's going to have to be a fundamental shift in the foundation of the social structure we call the United States of America. And if and only if, when that happens, can we talk about a celebration. This white nationalist wants you to get down or lay down, and let's see how he writes it. But in the eyes of this Texas historian, it is a mistake to abandon the unifying national holiday to the manipulations of the left. We should instead do what conservatives are best at: get back to the roots. There it is, baby. Get back to the roots. Get back. You want to get back to the roots? Respect your parents. That will be us. Oh, you ain't talking about the roots of humanity. You're talking about the roots of your funky ass settler experiment. And you're not even talking about that because you did a whole dissertation on how the state of Louisiana not only invented as it moved from Latin, Spanish, and French to Anglo, still has the Code Napoleon as its base legally, but Anglo transforms the populations there from African base to what you call African American, Creolization. Y'all always trying to separate us. And guess what? For some of these Negroes, it has baked in because they ain't studied none of this stuff. They just repeating shit and thinking immigrants took my job. Yeah, your black job. He writes, under the last 4 years, Juneteenth was an uncontroversial celebration of American freedom and the end of slavery in Texas. You smell that gaslight? Uncontroversial. Okay. The holiday commemorates the day General Gordon Granger issued General Order No. 3 in Galveston, informing Texas of the Emancipation Proclamation, freeing the state slaves, and marking the end of slavery in the Confederacy. Sure, it freed the state. Okay, this is the gaslit part too. The next year, in 1866, residents of Galveston began celebrating Jubilee Day, which eventually became what we know as Juneteenth. In 1979, Al Edwards, a Democratic state representative from Houston, sponsored legislation to make Juneteenth a paid state holiday. Governor Bill Clements, a Republican, signed the bill into law, and the holiday was born. Okay. That's bullshit. It was celebrated in Texas. It was celebrated other places in the South. And as Southerners moved north and connected, it was celebrated every place from Buffalo, New York, and Milwaukee, where them white nationalists going to be next week at the Republican convention, to Philadelphia, to all kind of places. Milwaukee, it was where they're going to be. On the West Coast. So you see, the narrative has already attempted to define who we are to other people, and now you're going to claim Juneteenth. He goes on and says, the national acceptance of Juneteenth also began in a bipartisan fashion. Notice the trick. The national acceptance of Juneteenth. This is not a nation. Because if you're talking about African people, a whole lot of African people, for decades, beyond what you call the South, celebrated. In our nation, in our governance formations, we did. Now, if you want to talk about nation in terms of the United States, I'm open to the conversation, but what you're not going to do is gloss us into your funky settler logic, because you want to preserve a very narrow definition of American and impose it on the rest of us with your patriarchy, with your naked white supremacy, with your classism, giving all the money to your billionaire friends. And you want us to somehow buy into it because some imaginary mystic chords of memory you've put together, which you by your own research have shown you know better than doing. This is pure ideologue at work. He says the national acceptance of Juneteenth, whatever the hell that means, also began in a bipartisan fashion, whatever the hell that means. Watch this line. Smell the gas on this one. President Trump was the first president to call for its adoption as a federal holiday in 2020, though it took a year for Congress to act. So now it's Trump, not Biden. When it did, the bill passed the Senate with unanimous consent and 415-14 in the House. With that kind of history, one would expect conservatives, even those wary of the pitfalls of identity politics like me. Dr. Kevin Roberts ran a Catholic school. He was a headmaster at a Catholic school. He's wary of the pitfalls of identity politics, though. Shit. This is intellectual warfare, friends. There's no reason to be engaged in what Prof. You and I have been doing and what we've all been doing over the arc of this last 4+ years, to be 227 and moving on the weekends in class, to be in Nubian narrative and growing stronger every day. There's no reason for us to be doing this if we're going to be slacking with it. No, we have to think much more decidedly and deliberately and consistently. So when you read BS like this, you can know these people for who they are. There's no bridge to be built with these people because he knows better with that kind of history. Come on. He says the holiday celebrates what Lincoln called the new birth of freedom for America. It celebrates the completion of the work of July 4th, 1776, the extension of liberty to all Americans, really. Okay, we've talked about Juneteenth. I'm not going to. It also commemorates the untold numbers of young men who died in the war fighting for that freedom. Let me tell you something, white boy. When Granger showed up in Galveston, when Emory, his lieutenant, read General Order Number 3, shortly thereafter, Texas was flooded with black troops in the Union Army because the white troops who had been fighting from the beginning began to muster out, and they were replaced by black troops who you wouldn't let fight officially until near the end of the war. So it was black men that spread that. And as we know, as Gerald Horne has written about extensively and so many others, that form of captivity continued on into the rest of the 1860s. And Africans backing up Mexicans, some of them went to Mexico to live forever. Don't you? This bullshit. It also commemorates the untold numbers of young men. You should put black men there because you know better. Anyway. If it's good enough for Texas, he writes, why are some conservatives starting to oppose the holiday? Conservative racists from day one, including in Texas. You think he signed that bill because he loved black people so much? Don't do that. Unfortunately, he writes, the answer lies mostly on the left. Here you come with the boogeyman again. The left has worked hard to co-opt the holiday and use it as a tool to divide their countrymen and replace the real Independence Day. The real Independence Day, July 4th, we was captive. You say Juneteenth fulfilled what was going on, completed the work of 1776. That's not on Independence Day for me. And he said, replace the real Independence Day. We still don't have no Independence Day, friend. Buddy, he writes on. It began on the very first federal Juneteenth when Democratic leaders tied the 156-year-old holiday to the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis. George Floyd, who went to Jack Yates High School in the shadow of Emancipation Park in Houston, across the street from Texas Southern. Jack Yates, who, of course, formerly enslaved, coming out of North Carolina, Virginia, who put the money together to buy that park to celebrate Juneteenth, among other things. Don't do that. Then he says, then they named the national holiday Juneteenth National Independence Day, setting it up in opposition to July 4th. I'm with that, baby, because I oppose you, everything your funky settler colony is about, and George Washington is not my father, and you can go to hell. If you don't believe that you can build a society where we embrace the entire narrative of all of our contributions, then you and I are mortal enemies, sir. And if your funky avatar gets in as president and they come to knock down doors and put people in internment camps for saying that, guess what? Not only do you have enough jails, You're going to find out what dancing looked like because both your feet about to come off. He continues to write and says, what was once a broadly accepted state holiday celebrating a significant moment in Texas history became a pawn in the national game of identity politics and subject to the division of the 24-hour news cycle. So now, all of a sudden, all the people in Texas, all the white people, the race, they love Juneteenth. And then the Democrats turned it into a national game of identity politics. Says the Guardian published a story calling Juneteenth the real Independence Day, a slap in the face to both our founders and all Americans who celebrate July 4th. Damn right. Slap them so hard in the face, they head come off. Read Doug Chambers' book, Murder at Montpelier. Them Igbo women was like, we're going to poison James Madison, grandfather. What the hell? I'm supposed to celebrate. Oh, man. Let's just observe the beauty of that story, that sentence again. A real slap in the face, rather, to both our founders. Who founders? And all Americans who celebrate July 4th. Is that a slap in the face? Good. Did you feel it? Hold up. Bring your chin up again. We'll slap it again. You going to celebrate a bunch of enslavers? A slap in the face? They be getting off lucky with a slap in the face. You think Denmark Vesey was interested in celebrating July 4th? Oh, and if you stop and say that these people are anti-American, what I would tell you is they are absolutely anti-American if America means white supremacy. And when the children of Denmark Vesey, as we have read in Martin Delany, and in the biography of Martin Delany written by Francis Rollin, Life and Public Services of Martin Delany, as we have read in that, when they sailed into Fort Sumter on the Planter, and Robert Smalls is there next to Martin Delany, who was with Martin Delany, the son of Denmark Vesey, when they raised the United States flag back up over that same part of Fort Sumter that you, sir, and all your funky Heritage Society friends want to return us to. And some crazy Negroes like Byron Donalds, who is satisfied with his position and is satisfied with his master. Says activists have called for Juneteenth to be used to explore racial trauma and enact reparations. Under these circumstances, it is no surprise that Americans are souring on Juneteenth. You talking about us? Okay. I'm not going to dignify that with a response. What they hear from the media and elected leaders on Juneteenth is a self-righteous, anti-American drumbeat of criticism and division. Guilty? No, not anti-American, anti-white supremacists. Now, if you don't get America away from white supremacy, then you can use those two things coterminously as far as I'm concerned. Other people have different opinions, no problem. Most Americans are excluded from the celebration, as is anyone who believes in America's founding or doesn't buy the narrative that America is systematically racist today. Amazing. I'm going to end with this sentence next. He says, but it's not too late to save the holiday from those who would abuse it. Here's one way. Celebrate it as the first day of a 2-week-long national celebration of independence and freedom stretching from June 19th to July 4th. I absolutely agree with Dr. Kevin Roberts, head of the Heritage Foundation, that the corridor between June 19th and July 4th should be framed off. Whereas he says it should be a time when we celebrate it as the first day of a 2-week-long national celebration of independence and freedom. I say we use it to contemplate the possibilities and promises and memories of what this state has become in the modern world system and what it is, and decide which way we're going forward. That's a very different project, isn't it, white boy? And if you decide that you want to have a debate about it, you should talk to yourself, because like Joe Biden said when they pressed him about talking to Putin, whatever our opinion is of that politics, and they said, well, you think you're up to talking to Putin? What did Joe Biden say? He said, I don't want to talk to Putin. Oh, so I ain't got no interest in talking to Kevin Roberts. So yeah, that's just kind of tying some of the things together, using Denmark Vesey as the line, because you don't care about me and I don't care about you. So see everybody. I think Biden's in Detroit tonight, right? Those of you who went to Renaissance High School, he's at Renaissance. He's there with the congressional delegation. No, he's not. None of them showed up. Neither one of the senators, Debbie Stabenow, Gary Peters in there. Elsa Slotkin is running for the Senate. She didn't show up. They all sent messages, but he's there with the governor. No, Gretchen Whitmer is in Idaho, conveniently. She didn't cancel her trip there to come. So Joe Biden's in the black high school talking to people and the people here. And today, Prof, is we talked about it this morning on the morning show on Sirius. Les Payne's birthday is today.
And we've talked about him before here.
We have. Oh yeah, that's why I say, part of your genealogy, part of that genealogy of master recorders of our of our history. So, all right.
Well, thank you for staying up. I know you are
No,
probably,
no, it's early for me. Normally Saturday, I'd be getting ready, to get up and work all night.
but it's Friday, Joe Biden. See how that
Joe
can happen?
Biden.
See how that
Joe
can
Biden.
happen?
Can we
It's
start the
Friday.
fundraiser at 8 instead of 9? That's all I'm talking about.
It can happen. It can happen to anybody, you know.
Everybody, what happened to me?
Oh, so today we had Dr. Pat call up from your days in Indiana going out. 83-year-old woman.
Oh,
Shout out to the
yes.
Nubians. Shout out to the Nubians who dropped the link and the young lady on Twitter who dropped the story. Because we were talking about dementia and things, and she was like, "I'm 83. I've been teaching for 62 years," and she said, "Dr. Carr comes to Indiana every year. He was there this year." And
That's the one. She's the one who brought us in. Pat Payne, Dr.
that's
Payne.
right. That's right.
Yeah,
That's
that
right.
was. In fact, she's the one. She's the sister who hired Mashariki Jawanza. Last I
See,
saw her at Mashariki's funeral. They
yep,
were
that's what she said. So but Black 83
a black 83, right?
not
Maxine
the same.
Waters is like, okay,
Not the same.
you 85 or 58? I'm telling you, these numbers been transposed.
Yes, it's not the same. It's not the same. But I'm gonna say less about that too. But
It's true.
but your tentacles are spread very, very vast and
We're part
wide.
of a fabric.
People that you touched. I'm just so grateful to be in community with you and everybody.
And she's still working. Isn't that something?
It's amazing.
Black women don't know how to retire. Nobody black.
She was about to go in, and I was like, "Ma'am, we got let's bring you back as an actual guest. Let's give you the deserve." But she was just calling in, to participate.
Oh, you didn't have her as a guest. She just called in.
She just called in, and I didn't know who she was, so I was just like, let me take this 83-year-old who's gonna put some perspective on what it means to be 83.
Listen,
Yeah,
I'm telling you right now, this serious. You said this. You always say it, but it is stunning to really experience this global kind of. I mean, people. They call it Dave Canton called today from Florida. Dave Canton is the chair of African American Studies at the University of Florida. He just called. And so it's, I hadn't talked to Stephanie Corbin in many years. She was vice president of student body when I was president. And I hadn't talked to Steph. I saw her brother who pledged me back in the May. You talking about now? We talking about almost 40 years ago. He's all right. I mean, so
just calling in. Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. It's the work of liberating and educating and loving.
Yes.
Loving us.
Ooh, I love that. Really educating, loving us.
Yeah, it's it's a collective journey, and I'm happy to hold your hand through this and walk with you in lockstep. So,
and thank you for trusting us to be part of this community. We're all in it. I'm fired up now because I don't know. See, wait a minute, Prof. I know we get ready to go, but you got to ask you because I know this is. I just see it here. He's here at Renaissance Biden. And I don't know what this is, but he looked like he is more fired up. See, this is crazy, right? Because these donors, the elite, whatever, now I'm calling them elites, the privileged class, he's channeling Bernie Sanders now. I mean, if there's a populism at work now, if he doesn't stop, I don't know. What do you think about it?
It flipped because, the thing about Black folk is like, it's kind of like, I could talk about my mama, but you can't. And I don't know what it flipped over into Biden being somebody. Now you coming for him, you coming for us. It's now, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. It happened just in a week. It happened just that quickly. Absolutely. And those folk don't understand what it is. And
interesting.
So, and even if we tell them, they still won't understand because it's in the fabric of who we are. And no poll can capture what is happening right now.
It's very interesting because the duopoly, and we talk about, Democrats and Republicans are different. We know that, but it is a duopoly. Those things can both be true. We know that, but
a Black Republican and a white Republican do not necessarily believe the same things, want the same thing. It's different.
Unless it's a Michael Steele Black
liberal. If you call yourself a liberal,
that's right.
That's not. I don't identify with that. So every time I hear it, I'm like, yeah, that's not me.
It's not me. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
But it's interesting. I mean, I think there's, I guess what we won't know. And again, there are pieces, and you sent this out on social media yesterday. I think whatever it is, what is it that we don't know? you know, I've always been very critical of Barack Obama because I think it was disingenuous. If you read David Garrow's book, Native Son, which is almost 1,000 pages, it's like he got a TikTok of Barack Obama's life from when he was born to today. I was like, he didn't track down everybody. You really see what emerges as a very bright person who is ambitious like a lot of people, who
And
ain't
transparent.
repaying favor. You know, what he did to Joe Biden is his life. That's what he does. Ask Camille Jones. Oh, let me not get into that.
Right, right.
Illinois.
But I'm saying your thing is also personal because you know,
Oh, very much.
right?
Very much so.
So,
And I don't know if Baba J is here tonight, but I'm telling you now, as long as Jeremiah Wright name be lifted up, there are things that Barack Obama has moved through the world that are really kind of unforgivable, even though Jeremiah Wright forgave him. But that's like you say, something happened to your daddy. I don't give a damn about you. But what I was about to say though is that, setting that aside, and I don't want to talk that is, when I see Corey Bush come on and say these people calling and they saying get rid of him, so the rest of y'all call because maybe y'all are skewing this. At what point do you think this apparatus might move to shut down honest discussion? Because these the money people now. I mean, they have gone all in. They're on the front page of all the newspapers. They done said we're gonna hold the money. Now he's out here with all these people, but the money people, and these are the people who are quote unquote our friends. So
well,
what are they risking by doing this? Do you think? I'm talking about the Hollywood people, the so-called, you know.
I mean, when you talk about Clooney, his wife was embroiled with some stuff, and she's from England with oh, I'm not gonna get into all of the details, but there could be something personal there that we don't know anything about. And he's, he could lead the country. There's nothing to lose here. And when you talk about the donor class or these folk with money, there's a $250 million war chest that they built up and amassed. So he won't have access to that. How can they shut that down? The money's already in. They've already brought in donors to, I think, 5 times, and Trump has depleted the RNC's money. Like he has run through it. So from a money standpoint, I think whoever's in that seat, and if it's Biden, he's good, right? But it is very telling that they are making this. Yeah, maybe they want control over that war chest. Maybe this is what it's about,
Well, the consulting class definitely they just want their payday. Yeah, they don't give a damn, and that's the callous nature of it. You know, people might accuse many of us, certainly me, of being cynical toward America. I have no cynicism. I don't give a damn about this country, but I'm willing to fight for our common humanity so that nobody suffers by sleeping outdoors. It breaks your heart when you see a human being suffer. You talk about this all the time. We all do. Conversely, you're willing to risk people's security, their health, their education, just so you get another $2 a coin. I mean, my God, what are we talking about? I just
but isn't this history? Whether we're talking about the French, whether we're talking about Great Britain, whether we're talking about the Romans, hasn't this been the story arc of all of these, great
and the cynicism? You know, it's so funny you say that because Macron was in the Financial Times yesterday saying nobody won the French elections. No, the left pulled your ass out the fire, and rather than give them the spoils, they came in first. They said, "Well, nobody really won, so I'm going to stay in charge." He gonna mess around. I'm gonna say, y'all have lost your minds.
But we've seen this before, so it's either we're not students of history. This is why we do this exercise every week to remember, so that we don't make the mistakes. This is why today it was important to talk about Vesey and VC and the turncoats within our community and how they were handled back then, and because it just keeps happening over and over again because we fail to remember.
That's right.
Yeah, remember.
Well, thank you. I mean, we'll see everybody's coming to BlurredCon tomorrow, and let's dial in and pay attention because we don't know where this is going, but we got a front row damn seat and we can't leave. So
history. All right. Love you.
Love you too.
All right.
See you.